Okay, so welcome to the second episode of Daughters of the Corner podcast. My name is Lauren, and today I have a special guest. We will call her Lola for the sake of this interview. So just to get started, I kind of want to do a quick icebreaker. And so just Lola, tell me where you're from. How did you get here? What interested in you in doing this podcast?
Okay, so hi. Thank you for having me. So, I'm from Florida. Grew up there, born and raised. Then I ended up moving to few years, well, no, like a year after I graduated high school. I'm interested in doing this podcast because I want to share my story and maybe it could help other women that might be in the game and struggling and, to get a better idea of where their life is going.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about like your experience in the game. How old were you when you got in? Or like how long have you been in it? Where are you at now?
So, I got in the game at 21, and I, at the time, was in school. I was in college. I was going for nursing. So I was just really, really struggling in school. I was having a hard time. My family, they were paying all my bills. But the reason that I kind of wanted to get in the game and start making my own money is because they weren't happy with like my choices, like what I would post on Instagram and stuff like that. I would post pictures that were kind of exposing myself. So they were like, oh, if you keep doing that, we're going to stop paying your bills. So I was like, I thought the rug was going to be pulled from under me. So every day I
Hmm.
was like, oh my God. Because they kept threatening me, like, oh, we're going to make you move back to Florida. We're going to make you move back to Florida. So I did not want that. I was like living my best life. I did not want to move back. So that's kind of how I got in the game. And then I got out of school. I stopped going. I was failing chemistry.
Hmm.
And I met a guy. He was like, "Oh, you should dance. Like you would make so much money dancing." Like, and I was like really naive, didn't know anything about it. I was thinking about it, but I never thought that I wouldn't do it on my own.
Hmm.
So he was like, "Yeah, all that school stuff, it's not good. It's not important. It's not going to get you anywhere." And then yeah, that's how I ended up getting in the game was him.
Okay, so where did you like meet him?
So I met him on Instagram and
Okay.
I was looking at him and I was very square. So at the time I was just like, oh my God, he looks so good. Like he looks
Hmm.
like he has money. I literally was just looking at his Instagram and I was like, oh, look at these cars. Like, I was just 21 and dumb. So just freshly 21 too.
Yeah, no.
So I think I remember the first time that we met. This was really stupid. I think that he came over my place and it sounds weird, but I think we went for a walk or something. And then he was like,
Hmm.
"Oh yeah, do you want to go get something to eat?" And I was like, "Sure." So I think we went to get something to eat, and we met up with one of his friends. It was like one of his pimp friends, and then like a girl, one of like his pimp friends' girls. So we
Hmm.
were just like sitting there and talking, and then that's when both of them were like, "Yeah, yeah, you would make millions. Like you should go to like this club, like and you should work there." And I was just like, "Okay, yeah," but I at the time didn't see anything wrong with it. So that's kind of what happened. And then I think was it maybe a week later or a couple days later, I went and bought shoes. I went and got stuff for my audition.
Hmm.
And then I auditioned and I didn't get into the first club that I auditioned at, but then he was like, "Oh no, go to this other club." So I went to
Hmm.
this other club. And that was the club that I ended up working at for what will be the next 4 years.
Wow, okay.
Yeah,
Did you know about the game before you met him?
I did
Or
not.
was
I
I
literally thought it was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I,
No,
I
you're
just
good.
literally thought it was like, I never, I mean, yeah, I heard about pimp, but like, it never crossed my mind that that would like somebody would, you know?
Hmm.
So that's kind of what happened. I literally probably only thought it was in movies.
No, that's absolutely true because mine was a similar situation. It wasn't like that, but like I met the dude on Facebook and it kind of became that situation. So I see that a lot more than I see the typical aggressive, like weird scenarios that they have in movies. They're just like
Mhm.
super sensationalized to like make it seem more than what it really is. But the truth of it is like so much more insidious. But like, how did your okay, so while you were dancing and stuff, let's talk
Mhm.
about your relationship with your pimp. When you started making money, like what were some of the things that he told you, or like how did you guys come to an agreement? Because we know that pimps usually have this thing where they want an agreement. Obviously, if they're telling you to do these things, it's because they want either a portion or all of your money. For the most
Mhm.
part, it's all of your money. So when did this come into play where he was like, hey, so you're gonna start paying me or whatever?
Okay, so let me start off by saying this relationship was very based off lies. So, I would say maybe a week into me dancing, I was a like, a baby stripper. I literally, I don't know. I didn't make that much money at first, but I probably the first week maybe made like $4,000, $5,000,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in a week or a week and a half. So anyway, he comes over, and at this point, like me and him are like having sex, like like, and then I can't remember where I had money stashed somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember going to look where I had my money stashed, and it was like not there. So I freaked out. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, like, where's my money? So he was
Mm-hmm.
the only person I had over my house.
Mm-hmm.
So I called him. He's like, oh, chill, chill. I put it somewhere. I was like, you put it somewhere?
Huh?
That's weird. Like, that is super weird that you would like do that.
Without
So
even discussing it, he was just like,
yeah, he just hid my money. Yeah. And at this time, like, I said my parents were still paying for everything. So I had an apartment. And so he would just come over. He had whatever other places, like he had like this one place, this house that he brought me over, and then yeah, and I think he had like a penthouse somewhere else. So yeah, so anyway, so he hid the money. I freaked out, but like he was like, oh, he put it in a weird place too. He put it like under my sink, like in my bathroom.
was there any of it missing?
I don't think so. I don't think it was
Mm-hmm.
missing. So anyway, whatever, freak out. I can't remember exactly what he said because this was a while ago. This was like 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes back, like we still are going out, and I don't know how far in, maybe a month in, as to where he was like, hey, can you give me this amount of money? I'm gonna flip it for you. Like he was basically like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna flip it. And
Mm-hmm.
then that became, I was like, okay. Or he was like, I love you. He was like, I love you so much.
No,
Yeah,
he
he was
pulled that card.
yeah, he was like, I love you. And I was like, I don't know. So anyway, like I gave it to him, and I felt like a pit in my stomach after that. I was like, you know what? Like I don't really like how I feel. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I just like still wanted to mess with him. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it came to a point where he started, what was it? He brought one, I think he did this to test the waters.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, there's like a girl I want you to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, he kept asking me, like, he's like, would you ever sell? Like, would you ever sell? I was like, no. I was like, he was like, not even for this much. I was like, no. Cause like at the time, like I was super, super, super square.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I would never do that. And then he was like, oh yeah, okay, okay. These girls are really winning. So I think this is when he wanted to test the waters. He introduced me to this one girl. He
Mm-hmm.
flew her out from, I think she lived in like Chicago or something. I don't know where
Mm-hmm.
she lived. And to me, she was just like, I feel bad looking back at it because
Mm-hmm.
like being in the game, I was like, okay, but I was kind of like, she was very brainwashed. But like me and this girl hated each other, and she hated me probably because of him, but also because she worked at like a really nasty
Mm-hmm.
club, and so she would do very cheap dates.
Mm-hmm.
And also she didn't like that at the time. I didn't do dates. I just strictly danced. And I think because I was in love with him, I was dumb and in love with him. So we
Mm-hmm.
were beefing, and he did this to test the waters. I thought this was weird,
Mm-hmm.
but this is when he started asking me for money. So he was like, oh yeah, like he would come over every morning after I would get off work, and then he would like take my money,
Mm-hmm.
and he would be like every day, like, oh yeah, just leave it on the counter. But then I started getting like scared because I told you I was freshly new into the
Yeah.
game. I was like, oh well, what if I just cut him off? Like, what
Mm.
like what if he like comes and finds me? You know how you're used to
Yeah.
like
Absolutely. Yeah.
watching movies and stuff. So
I think that's a genuine concern for a lot of people because that fear is what keeps a lot of people in the game. It's like, oh, but if I leave, because for me, in my experience, that was one of the reasons why I stayed. Not only, wanting to be with this guy because I was obsessed with him. I had an unfathomable obsession with this man, and I did not want anybody else to have him. I wanted all of that. And then not only that, but also the fear of like, okay, well, because I know he's dangerous. Like I've seen
mhm.
abuse was part of it for me. I know there might be other women who have experienced that. That was a part for me, and that was one of the other reasons why I was so afraid to leave him because I'm like, if I leave him, will he try to find me and kill me?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a definitely a genuine concern. And like I think a lot of these girls that are really deep in the game, they don't I think that they act tougher than they Like they just act
Absolutely,
tougher.
yeah.
You know,
No, yeah,
oh,
we
I'm
put
not
on
scared.
it's a facade. Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
facade. Yeah. Like they maybe deep down inside they might be scared, but they're like, oh, I'm not scared. I gotta pay my pimp. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I have like written down that I wanted to mention was that a lot of girls put on this front that things are better than they seem because they're trying to recruit for their pimp. Because their pimp is
mhm.
like, how are you gonna get people to come here if you're either acting square, you're acting like a fag? I don't know if you've ever got called that being in the
Oh
game,
yeah,
being
for sure.
being called a fag, or if you're acting this way, you're not going to be able to recruit other girls. And that's one of their main things is like, okay, you're only one of my girls. There's going to be other girls regardless. So you need to paint this picture of life is sweet and cheery and all these things in order to recruit other girls.
Mhm.
But in reality, is literally a front.
It is. I agree. And one of the other girls that he ended up bringing around, so you could see how, just to go back a little bit, the way that I was brought up was different than the girls that he brought around me were brought up. So I feel like there was
Mm-hmm.
some like what would you call it?
Hard feelings.
Hard feelings and
Yeah.
disagreement and
Yeah.
jealousy, a little bit of jealousy and envy, which
Mm-hmm.
is normal. So,
Mm-hmm.
because he ended up bringing this other girl around, she was from California and she was very young.
Mm-hmm.
She had her pimp's name tatted on her face. I've
Mm-hmm.
never, at this point, like, I've never seen stuff like this. So I'm like,
Yeah. What?
and I still have my own place, but he would like be like, oh, come over. And like this girl,
Mm.
and I would stay over the penthouse like a lot of times, even
Mm-hmm.
though like it just made me sick just being around. Like, I was always sick to my stomach
Yeah.
just thinking about it. And this girl was just trashy looking. She was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I walk the blade. I'm a real
Mm-hmm.
hoe. You're not a real hoe. Your parents, you were fed with a silver spoon in your mouth. Like being,
But
yeah.
that's something that they do. They instill this divisiveness, like this division in our mind. Like there's separate tiers of sex work, and there's different genres. Some are dancers, some are escorts, some are blade walkers or stomp down 304s, however you want to call it. And that was definitely something I saw a lot because when I started off in the game, I worked the internet. I was
Mm-hmm.
never a stripper. I was never like, when I first started off, this was after Backpage had already started. It was 2018. And I got straight on Mega Personals, Adult Search, like all the sites that I could get on. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I started meeting girls, they were like, "Oh yeah, I've walked the blade." And then I did hear so many negative connotations, like, "Oh, she's a street walker," like this and that, like. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, like I understand, there's different. I don't want to say it like in a negative way, like, oh, there's different levels. You're not dirty because you did it one way or another. Because at the end of the
Right.
day, what it all boils down to is a form of sex work. And I know there's going to be a lot of like probably hard feelings about that. But like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that in a way to like put anybody down or anything. But at the same time, that was what was happening in the game. A lot of
Right.
girls were being put down because like, oh, you made money this way, you did that. The only thing that I will say that I do not agree with on
Mm-hmm.
the level of sex work is people who did bareback and people who did those types of things because
I
that
agree.
was you're putting your health at risk. The whole game in itself is a risk. There's different risks. You get risk with clients, risk with pimps,
Mm-hmm.
risk with even the other girls that you work with because these girls will play straight in your face, be friendly and all this stuff, and they're going back running and telling whoever
Yeah.
things to try to get you in trouble. And I would always get in trouble. So I kind of want to segue into like when you had, wifeys and you were working under this pimp, how was that situation for you? Did you ever like eventually live with him? Like, did he ever make you give up your apartment and then you go and live with them all together? Or like, how did that work for you?
Never made me give up my apartment or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but there were other girls that were around at the time. So I would go over there and stay over there, but there was always just some type of like argument or something going
Mm-hmm.
on and drama. And
Mm-hmm.
it just came to the point where I was like, just don't bring me around other girls. Cause I was like, it just is too much. Like I really didn't start getting used to like the other girls being around until later. But I told you about the first girl he brought around. He ended up just having to separate us. Like we just had no contact, even though he would have me watch her daughter. So this girl would go
Mm-hmm.
work day shift at the club, and then he'd be like, "Oh yeah, she needs like her daughter watched." So I was like the
Mm-hmm.
babysitter, and then at night I worked. So that's kind of how that was. But it just was not a good
Yeah.
experience with girls around, and I think that was because he was a liar, and I would
Mm-hmm.
call him like a Romeo. I would call him like a Romeo pimp,
Absolutely.
telling
Yeah.
every girl that he loves her,
Mm-hmm.
having sex with them without protection,
Mm-hmm.
getting girls pregnant and feeding them this like, oh yeah, we're gonna be together, then just telling them to
Bro.
get an abortion. Like,
No, when I tell you that was the same thing, there was. Okay, so when I was with my parent for the majority of the time that I was with him, I was the only girl because I was a bona fide square. Like I was like, this is my man, but you have to give me a little bit of a wiggle room here because when I met him, that's how I met him. He was my man. There was this one girl that he used to tell the same thing that he told me, like, oh yeah, when it's all said and done, we're gonna get married. If you
Mm.
want, we'll have babies, like whatever you
Oh
want.
my
Just
God.
right now, we gotta focus on getting this money. We could worry about all that later. Right now, and I actually made a video about that on TikTok where it says, those exact words like, oh, we're
Mhm.
family. We're supposed to do this together. We'll get married. We'll settle down. But at the end of the day, they do not care about that. They don't
They
have
don't
a
care about.
future goal for you. All they have is a right now. I want to make as much money out of you as I can now. Because when you get tired of this, or when you finally wake up and realize that I'm not,
Mhm.
then at least I can say, hey, I made some type of money off of you. And then I'm going to keep it pushing on to the next girl. And it
They
just
just throw you out,
continues.
discard you. They're done. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I on to the next girl that they can
Mm-hmm,
play. Yeah.
mm-hmm. So, when did you finally leave your pimp and how did that go?
So basically, I left him. I would say it was pushing a year.
Mm-hmm,
So I ended up getting pregnant. He told me, he fed me this whole lie. I
mm-hmm,
want to be with you. Like literally planned to get me pregnant. It was like
mm-hmm,
planned, and it worked the first time. So I was
mm-hmm,
like, okay, all right, whatever. I was in love with him, so I was like, yeah, we'll have a baby. So got pregnant, and then found out I was pregnant literally 2 weeks after, like right away, because I was expecting it. So then I told him, and he was like, oh no, no, we can't keep this. We can't keep this baby. I'm like, weren't you just telling me? Like I sound like I'm crazy, but he
mm-hmm.
literally was telling me I want a baby with you, for him to be like, no, we can't keep it, get an abortion. So
Oh, all
was
right, cool.
I was fed up. Like this man had already, oh, another thing that made me not want to deal with him is he gave me and another girl a fake Rolex. And then I found out and I called him out on it. And he was like, oh no, because Trick told me, oh
Mm-hmm,
no, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I would never. I was like, do you know how embarrassing this is? I was like, you gave me a fake Rolex. You think I'm stupid? So I found out, but I think it was that, and then like the pregnancy thing that was
mm-hmm.
just the straw that broke the camel's back. So anyway,
Yeah.
ended up getting the abortion. I cut him off. Like I stopped answering him, and
Mm-hmm.
he was just like he was getting mad. And then he came knocking at my door, girl. He was knocking. He was like, answer the door. Like, just knocking, answer. Please, just come talk to me. Come talk to me. I was like, just acting like I wasn't home. And he was like, I know you're in there. And then he was like, probably knocking for like 20 minutes before he gave up. And then, like, I
That's
wasn't
some
scared.
psycho stuff.
It's psycho. It's giving psycho. But yeah, he probably only did that because he felt like, oh, damn, I'm missing out on my money. Like, because I ended up coming to the point where I started making a lot of money. Like,
Mm-hmm,
and I wasn't. Well, I did at the end maybe start doing dates, but I wouldn't do anything.
mm-hmm,
It would be guys that I would meet at the club, and
mm-hmm,
I they would just be, I don't know. It was just easy stuff. So I would go with like,
mm-hmm,
this one girl that became my wifey, and me and her got like really close. But he
mm-hmm,
tried to be like, "Oh, we're poly, we're not."
mm-hmm.
Like like whatever. So it was just like it was a bad situation, and it ended up being some drama even with her. But like all the situations, like even the cool ones, there always ended up being some drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I just can't take it anymore. Like this is like gonna kill. The stress is gonna kill
No,
me, and I
yeah.
don't get it. So it's crazy. Even after this situation, I don't want to say that the second situation was bad because it really wasn't. But you would have thought that I would have learned my lesson.
Listen, sometimes you think that it's just that person and it's not the game as a whole. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I thought. Because when I was with my pimp, I left him for a pimp in New York because I was like, oh, I figure that if I could just go with a pimp who I don't have any emotional feelings for, who I didn't like start out the game with, that I
Mm-hmm.
can make it work. But the problem with this pimp was that his program was completely different. Like my pimp
Mm-hmm.
gave me a lot of quote unquote freedom to work how
Mm-hmm.
I please. So as long as I was making money, as long as I was making my quota for the day, he didn't care how I was getting it, whether it was online, in person. He never really made me work on the blade or anything. But then when I went to this new pimp in New York, he made me work the blade. He put me on the blade for the first time. He said that was his program because in New York, at least in his experience or with his girls, they didn't really make money online like that. They made money walking the strip and walking in Times Square and making money that way, going
Mhm.
physically to do it. When he put me out there, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not even gonna
Right.
sit here and lie to you. I don't know how to finesse like that. The men that contact me know what they want already. They seen me, they
Right.
seen my ad, they know for a fact that's the only thing I have to do is maybe a little persuading, making them feel comfortable enough to want to come, but not to the point where I have to go up to this complete stranger who's drunk and like flirt my way. And so like I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm an introvert. Like I had been with
Right.
my P for like at least a year by then. So I had become very familiar with doing online and like Snapchat and like pulling people from different websites and stuff like that. But then doing this, I
Mhm.
was like, no. When he put me on the blade, I made money because it was kind of like working the internet, but in person. Like they already know what they're there for. They know what they came for. So
Mhm.
that was faster for me. But like even still, I'm just like, even after being there, like he tried to make up for what my pimp wasn't doing. Cause I told him one of the main
Mhm.
reasons why I had issues with my pimp was because my pimp was squares. Like I
Right.
was like, I'm out here paying you. You tell me that if
Mhm.
I have to make a certain amount of money, so you're withholding sex from me, knowing that that is like the thing that's really keeping us together, at least in my
Right.
mind. That's what was working, keeping us there was keeping us intimate because I couldn't have what a trick. I'm doing it
Right.
with you. I can do these things with you, and you're not giving me that. So I'm gonna go somewhere else to find it. Like
Exactly.
so this new pimp, he was doing all of those things and he made sure because obviously I made that very clear, but I still wasn't happy because at the end they like I liked this dude, but I didn't like his program. And
Mhm.
then at the same time, I was also still obviously like in love with my original pimp. So I was just like drinking alcohol every day, trying to drown out the fact that I hated being here, that I was like
Mhm.
managing. And then on top of that, he had four girls living in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn.
Oh my
So
God.
two girls were sleeping on the couch. He'd come in, send girls to work, keep one of us behind so that way he could fool around with them before he sent them to work. It was a
He
mess. And
just
I was
didn't give
just
a
like, no. And I'm so glad because when he kicked me out, he kicked me and another girl out because another girl had got there probably like maybe a week or two before we got kicked out. This was, I want to say, around Christmas of 2019. January 2nd of 2020, he kicked us both out because he put us to walk in Times Square. It's freezing outside, first of all.
Mhm.
It's brick. My feet hurt. I'm chunky, so wearing heels it don't go for me. Like it hurts my feet.
Mhm.
So me and her sit in the car and we ended up falling asleep. And the girls walked by the car and saw us chilling in the car. He sent everybody home and he beat the crap out of the new girl. He didn't really beat me that bad, and I don't know why. Maybe it's I don't maybe it's because of the money that I brought him. Because when I came to him, I brought him like 10 bands. Well, it was like
He didn't
seven.
want
I brought him
you.
a feast. He didn't really like he smacked me, but he didn't. He beat the living crap out of this girl, and me
Oh
and
my God.
her, we're still like I still communicate with her to this day because I'm like, we went through stuff together, but she's also a really sweet person. She didn't deserve
Mhm.
that, but
Right.
anyway, he kicked us out. 2 months later, he's in jail for human trafficking because he decided to carve his initials into a girl's leg with a butter knife or something.
What?
Yo, and I was, oh God, thank you, God, because you knew exactly what you were doing. I ended up obviously going back to my pimp, but when I saw that, I was like, I am so glad that things did not get that weird when I was there because I barely saw him. Like, he was barely
Wow.
there. He only came over to tell us to get ready to go to work. Like, for the most part, he had his own separate apartment and he had all the girls um living in their own place. So
This sounds like like it sounds insane. Sounds like a
girl,
movie.
but yeah, I ended up going back to my pimp, and I was just like, well, I guess at least I can deal with the devil that I do know, because I know this man inside and out. I know how he works. I didn't
Mhm.
realize how much of a liar and how much of a manipulator he was, but I was able to see like, hey, like, okay, so it's kind of the same overarching like agreement between all pimps. They now looking back at it, I could say they all had stupid rules. They all had made their own rules to fit their agenda to do what they wanted to do. And it was giving very much double standard. I can do this, you can't do that. But like at the end of the day, they are all liars and they're all
The oh.
manipulators and they all take advantage of women to make money. And most of
Mhm.
the time, girls who get in the game because they were talking to a dude who they liked and he convinced them to do it.
Right.
So, and now, because I just want to talk about your experience that you've had working without a pimp. How was like what the differences were, and when you first started working by yourself, did your old pimp contact you? I'm sure you've dealt with other pimps trying to contact you and trying to recruit you as you were independent. I don't like using the term renegade because
Mhm.
it's derogatory. We know
It's
what,
a negative
yeah.
connotation, yeah.
What were the major differences, or just talk to me briefly about that?
So I would say that I was independent probably for, I would say a year. And I would say that the only reason that I became independent, I would say it's like, it was like a gift from God. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean this in a bad way, but
Mm-hmm.
the second guy that I was dealing with, he got into some legal trouble and that kind of broke us apart.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he did a lot for me. So I didn't feel like at the time what I gave him was bad. So I started working by myself. I was dancing, I was saving all my money. I was doing anything I could do to make money. Not
Mm-hmm.
any, you know what I mean? But I
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
going on dates. I was going on dates every day. I was because at this point I started doing dates.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to work 5 days a week. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this money back like as
Mm-hmm.
much as I can. And I felt like at first it wasn't flowing the same. But then I
Mm-hmm.
started getting in my groove and it started, I started doing better. And I would say that a part of me, it was hard to keep the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But once I did and I realized that I didn't need that, it
Mm-hmm.
was amazing. And then I started getting long term like situations. Like, I don't know, a lot of girls in the game frown upon this. I don't know why, but
Mm-hmm.
more like sugar baby situations. So
Mm-hmm.
because I was playing the long term game with these guys. It was like,
Yeah.
you know what, like, yeah, like, whatever, whatever, like not just trying to get the money for
Mm-hmm.
an hour and go. So I
Mm-hmm.
realized when I played the long term game, I just got so much more. I would say I'm still kind of, that's where I'm at right now. I don't
Mm-hmm.
work or
Mm-hmm.
anything. I just have one. I
Mm-hmm.
had a second situation, but that one kind of went a little I don't know, too much drama.
Mm-hmm.
My one situation is it's good, and I've known him since 2020, and I would say that's been really good for me because I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to work, and he's talking about investing in my business, and he's really serious about it. Like his actions line up with his words. So yeah, now I'm in school and doing better.
So grateful for that because I love to see women being entrepreneurs and being their own bosses and doing stuff, especially coming out of something as hard as like having a pimp. So being able to do that is a great thing, and I commend you for that. Um, what are like how do you separate your boundaries for like having a sugar daddy versus having like a personal relationship with somebody? Where do you set those boundaries?
So I would say the one guy that I just told you like I cut off,
Hmm.
I would say he was my boyfriend.
Okay.
And he was my boyfriend and he did never paid me. He was never a client.
Hmm.
Um he just bought me whatever I wanted. He never said no to me. I want a
Hmm.
Chanel bag. We're going tomorrow.
Hmm.
I want to go to Nobu. We're going tonight. I want to do whatever on a vacation.
Hmm.
We're going first class. So we have more of that type of situation. And I mean, if I ever needed something, of course he would pay my rent. And he had before, but he was never a client. He was never that type of situation.
Hmm.
And the reason that we recently just broke up is because, well, first of all, I found out he was still having stuff going on with his baby mama, and
Okay.
one of his exes kept DMing me over and over, and I'm like, you know
Hmm.
what? I don't want this drama anymore.
Hmm.
So we kind of have gone our separate ways. And then
Hmm.
so I would say, I guess it goes off of vibe,
Hmm.
and if they ever, I don't think that I would ever pursue something with a guy that was paying me
Hmm.
like that was a trick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if it was like a guy that he was my boyfriend and he wasn't a client, then yes. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. How, like, when you met this guy, what were like your intentions, or like how did you guys communicate? Okay, like, did he know what type of work you were doing? And then he was just like, okay, like, I want to be this long-term like benefactor for you, or like, how did that
So
happen?
he knew that I was a dancer.
Okay.
He acted like in the beginning he didn't really care.
Hmm.
I would say I never asked him for anything in the beginning. We would just go on dates and
Hmm.
there'd be simple dates. But then
Hmm.
he was just like so like he was in love with me. So
Hmm.
he would just start like buying me stuff and he would just take me out what vacations.
Hmm.
And then I would say my intentions with him, it wasn't to take anything from him. I just
Hmm.
had this like soft girl life
Hmm.
in my mind. I think being
Yeah.
fed
Yeah.
from TikTok, like I wanted to live a
Absolutely.
soft life.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
That's
And
I've
that's like
seen
why I
so
think it's
many TikToks, hard wig, soft life. Like I've seen so many different things of like girls even giving like tutorials. And I think especially with that one creator, I don't know what her name is, Sherry or something, the sprinkle
Sherry,
lady.
sprinkle,
She out
sprinkle.
here giving like advice on how to become a sugar baby. And I'm like, okay, me in the perspective that I am now, do I agree with it? Absolutely not. But I think that it
Mhm,
is safer than
mhm.
doing sex work with a pimp. And
Oh,
that's something else that I want to talk about. So let's talk about the difference in safety of like working with a pimp and not having a pimp. Did you feel safer when you had a pimp, or do you feel safer when you were independent?
I was I would say safety was never really like too much of a concern for me because
Hmm.
I worked in the club. And I mean, yeah, I did do dates, but I was doing dates with like guys that I knew that were like my regulars. So I was never like really too scared. So I wouldn't say like the safety part was ever an issue. I would say that I felt like lonely and less motivated. But I mean, the
Like
money's
with a
not
pimp or without a pimp?
without I felt like a little unmotivated because I'm like,
Hmm.
damn, I don't have anybody like pushing me. I gotta push myself. But I've always been pretty like
Hmm.
self-sufficient. So
Yeah.
I would say it wasn't too big of a hurdle, but at first it was hard to like
Yeah.
get past that.
No, I can see that, but I also think that like a lot of the pimp's motivation is really just like coercion. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because their motivation is like manipulative. Like, oh, you got to think
Mm-hmm.
about like if you don't get to work, how are you gonna do this? Blah blah blah. I remember when I was getting
Mm-hmm.
ready to leave my pimp on one occasion, and this was like right before I like was done with the game, period. I told him, I'm like, I kind of want to go back to Florida. Like I kind of just want to go back to living a regular life. Like this is exhausting. And he was like, oh, but you got to think about it. Like the money, everything you're trying to do needs money. Like you got to stay in the game. And I was just like, you know what? That makes sense. And looking back at it now, I'm like, when you think about their motives for even motivating you to do the work, it's not for you at all. It's for them. So I think in finding motivation in yourself, it might be a little bit more challenging. And that's also
Mm-hmm.
something I've been learning, like motivating yourself, being a pioneer, not really having anybody who completely understands what it is you're trying to do or your vision, and constantly trying to be the one to be like, okay, you got this. Okay, you can figure it out. Like, I pray a lot about stuff and I ask God for guidance about a lot of things because I cannot do all of the things that I want to do by myself. So, like, in the aspect of like the things that you're doing now, where did you get like the motivation to want to do these things? Do you see, was it like motivation to like not be in the game at all? And I know like you have, like, you're not like in the game, but like you have, in this situation or sugar daddy or whatever. Do you ever see yourself like not having that at all? And is your motivation stemming from that? Or is it just
Mm-hmm.
additional to whatever it is that you're doing outside of like school and stuff?
So I would say like right now, like I'm kind of just going with the flow. Like I have him and I want him to like set me up like my business and buy
Hmm.
me a house and like what he said he's all gonna do.
Hmm.
I do feel like I'm out of the game and kind of out of touch with the game now because I haven't worked or anything in a long time and our communications mostly through text. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we go on trips or whatever, but I mean, I would say like my motivation is to get my life set up
Hmm.
comfortably and then I really do like I want to settle down, like I want to get married, I want to have a baby, but I'm like I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Hmm.
So, I think like a part of it was like the game is not forever. Like you have to get
Hmm.
out. I didn't want to be in it anymore because I was just like I saw bigger things for myself. Like there's nothing wrong with like saving some money, um getting yourself together. But now I feel like I'm to a certain point where I feel like I've gotten a lot of stuff and the price went up. Like for a guy that wants to like
Hmm.
deal with me and be my boyfriend, like
Hmm.
for a relationship, like I feel like now I can. It sounds bad, but I feel like I
Hmm.
can pull like a higher tier
Hmm.
guy. I just got to get myself out there.
Yeah. So with like your experience in the game and you said you want to get married and all these things. These are things that I think about like
Mm-hmm.
even now. Like I think about the fact that one day I will be married because I know like I have the desire. Something that I've learned is that usually when you have a desire that's very strong in your heart, depending on, like the motivation for that desire, obviously it's
Mm-hmm.
something God placed in your heart. So it's possible. You want better
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. You want to get married. You want all of these great things. You want to have your own home. You want to live a good life. And these are all,
Mhm.
in my eyes, based on morals or things that are, that are not wicked, or I won't say wicked, I don't like that word, but like that are not messed up. Because, a lot of society's morals are out the window. People want things because
Mhm.
they just want pleasure and all these things. And a lot of people's motivations for things are not altruistic or selfless. Like they're very like selfish and stuff like that. But I think about myself in a way like, okay, I have gone through all of these things. I've experienced all of these things for the person that I potentially want to marry or date or whatever. Like, how would they handle it? Do you ever think of things like that? Like, like how the person you
Mhm.
do you think that there's going to be like a barrier, like things that you're going to have to learn or overcome, or like, because I constantly think about like, okay, the person that I marry is going to have to be a strong man. Like, obviously, I'm not that person anymore. I've grown to be a completely different person, in my perspective, being a Christian, God forgave me, Jesus forgave me.
Mhm.
So, obviously I want somebody who has that same perspective. I'm forgiven. My slate is wiped clean. I am not the person that I was anymore. But do you ever think about how, like, maybe if your past or whatever will affect the things that happen in the future? And, like, what is your standpoint on that?
So yeah, sure. Like I feel like it does affect future relationships sometimes. So I will say like my past relationship, the guy that I just broke up with,
Hmm.
I didn't tell him everything about I didn't tell him too much.
Hmm.
Obviously he knew I was dancing
Hmm.
when I met him. But I ended up telling him a little bit
Hmm.
more once I felt more
Comfortable?
comfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I don't want to say he felt betrayed, but he was
Hmm.
like, damn, you never told me that. But I
Hmm.
think that he kind of felt bad. He was like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, like you've been through that. Like, I hate that you
Hmm.
ever went through that. But I don't know. It's hard to be vulnerable like that
No,
because people
absolutely.
that haven't been through it, you never know what they can do with that information, you
Exactly.
know? And that's
Exactly.
like the scary part. They might like later throw it in your face, or they might
Hmm.
later like tell somebody that you don't want to know,
Yeah.
or just use the information against you in any part. So it is really hard to be vulnerable. And I think that like the next relationship that I get into, um, I would say I don't know. I don't think I would tell them right off the bat
Hmm.
because it's not something that's affecting me in my daily life. And I think like once we get to like a comfortable point in that relationship, then I will go ahead and tell them. But it's hard for me to date now because guys
Yeah.
are like, how do you live this lavish life?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, because I'm like, I say that I'm a stay-at-home girlfriend. I'm like, I mean, I
Hmm.
really could say I'm a stay-at-home daughter. Like, how are they gonna know? Because
Hmm.
I'm in school, I'm like living life, like going on trips. They're like, so how do you not work and you live such a good life?
Hmm.
And I don't know how to answer that question for them. So
Yeah.
that is one thing. Like navigating, like dating is hard. And at this point, if a man's not ready to come in my life and provide, I just don't really care for the relationship.
No, I feel that completely in the aspect of like being vulnerable, because that's what got me in the predicament where I was trafficked in the first place. I was
Mm-hmm.
too vulnerable with this man.
Yep.
I met him, the first conversation, I was comfortable with him because he was very charismatic. And I feel like that's something that
Mm-hmm.
all these pimps have, is a gift of gab. Like they know how to
Yep.
use the words to their advantage, and
They do.
they paint this picture in this life, especially for somebody who was in a vulnerable position like myself. When I met my pimp, I was an alcoholic. I was struggling in my job. I was struggling to pay my rent, and I was kind of in a similar situation to you in the aspect that I had family members helping me with my rent and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And once I got into this relationship with him, like right before I met him, I started drinking and smoking again. I had been
Mm-hmm.
sober for like a year, and then I was just like, oh yeah, no, I've been good. I can, indulge a little bit, because I didn't understand how addiction worked. I didn't understand that you have to stay sober, because even if you like drink a little bit, and a person who's an addict will take that little bit and go a mile. But like I had somebody in my uncle was paying my rent and stuff. So when I started drinking and smoking again, he was like, I'm not helping you anymore. Like we had an
Mm-hmm.
agreement. You wanted me to help you, then I'm gonna help you like this. But if you're doing these things,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm not gonna, support that behavior. So
How old were you?
this was, this was in 2018. So I was
Okay.
25, I think. I don't even
Okay.
know. But I had been struggling with addiction for a couple of years, actually, since I like met my son's dad. I started my addiction journey started with perks. Like everybody
Mhm.
was talking about perks and perks this, and everybody was rapping about them. And, you
Mhm.
know, I know that people in my family had struggled with addiction, but I didn't know
Mhm.
that it was like hereditary. It was kind of a gene thing, like, it passes
Yeah.
down from one to the other or whatever. So I just started popping perks and then it became a habit. And then after I had my
Mhm.
son, I had a C-section. They prescribed them to me and I got on them real bad. I was going through post
Wow.
depression. I started taking them. I started drinking. So I had been struggling with addiction for a while. And then I got clean after a year because I hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
I like spiraled completely out of control. I went to jail. And when I got out of jail, I was clean and sober. I was like, I'm not
Mhm.
drinking. I'm not smoking. I'm not doing anything. And then like a month, I think it was literally like a month before I met my pimp or my trafficker, whatever you want to call him, that I started drinking and smoking again.
Mhm.
And, I was in that predicament where I had become a full-blown alcoholic again. I was going
Mhm.
and buying bottles of wine and drinking 2, 3 bottles of wine a night at a time. And
Wow.
I was trying to get my son back. I was going through so many different things. And then I met this man who portrayed this image of everything that I wanted. He
Mhm.
did things for me that no other man had because I had been in two serious, I want to say, relationships before him, but they were always taking from me. He was
Mhm.
to ever say, "Oh yeah, I'll help you with your electric," and it wasn't like this big old like, "Oh, I'm gonna pay." No, it was like, "Oh, you're
Yeah.
struggling, like you can't pay it. I'll pay it for you like this one time." But to me, it was just such a grand gesture because both of the men I had dealt with before didn't do that for me. Like even my son's dad, like he used to make money, but it
Mhm.
always backfired. And then like he would make money for a good period of time, and then he would fall
Mhm.
into this like valley, and then I'd have to pick it up. So when he did that for
Mhm.
me, I was just like, oh, like he's the one, like you
Right.
and then he painted this image of like because I told him the first person who ever actually trafficked me was my son's dad. We did it for I want to say that we did it for 6 months before I had my son. And well, before I even found out I was pregnant with my son, I'm not to say before I had my son, I was not
Mhm.
doing this while I was pregnant. Before I found out I was pregnant with my son, he had me posting ads on Craigslist. No, there was
Oh
no
my
back page. He had me posting ads on Craigslist. We were in Pennsylvania. And I told my last pimp trafficker about it, and he was like, "Oh, so like you kind of done it before." And then when I met him, I had a sugar daddy, which was because with all the things that I had going on, and then my uncle not helping me with my rent anymore, and then my job was dependent on the housing market, which was up and down, so it wasn't consistent. My money was just like I needed something. So I told him about the sugar daddy. I told him about
God.
my baby daddy and how we did this. So he knew what happened, but he didn't just go right away and say, "Hey, I used to be a pimp," like blah blah blah.
Right.
No, it was a slow grooming process. He made me
Mhm.
dependent on him. He made me trust him. He made me all of these things. And then
Yep.
he was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I used to be a pimp." And I'm like, "You used to be? What do you mean you used to be?"
Like you used to be, right? Like what?
No, he's like, "Yeah, no, I can't really do it now because he was on parole or probation or something, and he
Mhm.
was on paperwork, so he couldn't leave the state of Florida. So he was like,
Mhm.
I can't do nothing right now." He was literally 2 months away from being off probation. And at the same
Okay.
time, he was getting off probation. I ended up losing my job because the housing market went like a crash. So
Mhm.
they laid me off. I ended up losing custody of my son because me and my mom got into like a drunk argument,
Mhm.
and they took him from my home. And this wasn't just like the first time. This was kind of like a back and forth situation over
I'm
like a
sure that
period
was
of
rough
years.
for you.
So all of these things happening, and then on top of me losing my job, my lease was about to be up, and they weren't renewing the lease to me because I kept paying my rent late. So he took it as the perfect opportunity. He was like, "All right, we finally gonna do this." So I was
Mhm.
in a vulnerable position, and they come in like a thief in the night, telling you
Yep.
all these things, giving you all these promises, and saying, "Hey, we can fix this, we can change this," and
Mhm.
then you end up in a situation that you didn't even know you were going to be in
Oh, facts.
because
Yeah.
they paint it to be this completely different picture than what it really is, which is most of the time, it is human trafficking.
It is.
And there's girls who don't know that. So, yeah.
I agree. I agree with you.
Okay. So, as we get ready to close, do you have any advice for any women who are maybe in a similar position to you, or to maybe somebody who's in a more vulnerable position, who gets approached by a man to promise them all these things? Or do you have any advice for somebody who's dealing with this and thinking about maybe going into the game, or who's being persuaded by a male party to go into the game? What would you tell them?
Sure. So I would say to the girls that are not already in the game, just don't do it. Just focus on what you're currently doing. Focus on your dreams and, aspirations, because I feel like once you get in the game, it really changes who you are. Like, I don't want to say it changes completely who you are. You can become, a totally different person, but I mean, it really affects you, and it will have long lasting things that might make you feel just never feel the same, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not never, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel the same as how I did as before I got in the game. Like, I think I hate feeling like I'm always so money driven and so money hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I liked feeling like how I was before. Like, I didn't really care. Like, I liked nice things, but I wasn't like how I am now. So I would say keep doing what you're doing, and you can build a great life and not be in the game. And so the girls that already are in the game, I would say you don't need a pimp. Focus on getting out of the game, because the game is not forever.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be in your 30s and 40s in the game. Use it now as a tool or a stepping stone to do something bigger, because you really can. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm proof of it. Like,
Yeah.
I know I'm not like the best because I have like whatever sugar daddy situation, but I'm not working. I'm
Mm-hmm.
chilling. I'm working towards like building a business. I'm in school, like it's a way better situation. I'm way happier.
No, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I definitely want to say I wouldn't I wouldn't want to put you on a spectrum of like better or not better because of being in the game or not. Because at the end of the day, your advice, your perspective is valuable. You can be in the position that you're in now and say, hey, like I've done this and I've done this.
Mhm.
And to sit here and say that even with all the things that you've seen, but having a pimp and not having a pimp, you can still say that it's affected you. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the goal of this is to show people how the game literally like kind of rewires your brain, which is something I've had to unlearn. I've had to literally be in a position where I basically started over. I was broke. And
Mhm.
like after I left the game, I was broke for a period of about 2 years, 2.5 years where I didn't work. I didn't do anything. And this was not really by choice. This was kind of like God's plan for my life. And I didn't know it at the
Mhm.
time, but it was, him sitting me down and trying to rewire my brain to get out of the mindset of you always have to have money, you always have to be working, you always have to do
Mhm.
this because my value was founded in how much money I made. I
Mhm.
was
It's part of the
dependent.
brainwashing.
Yeah, I was very dependent on, and I found my self-worth in the amount of money I made. So if I didn't make my quota for the day, I felt like an absolute piece of trash.
I know you feel worthless. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to unlearn all of those things. And this shows people that, that's not something that you necessarily want to feel. Absolutely. Is money helpful? Absolutely. Does it, get you things that other people might desire, maybe things that you desire, having nice things, but at the end of the day, is it worth going through all of these things to get those? Or, is it worth waiting for and doing things the right way without sacrificing your mental health, your soul, your morals, and all these things to get them? And being in a position where you can say, hey, like I've been through some stuff. Because even now, you can say, hey, I've been through some stuff and it might have changed the way I think, but at the end of the day, I can say that I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of who I'm becoming, and I'm glad that I didn't let that experience change me, which I'm sure you
Mhm.
can say, because even though there are some aspects about it that maybe you wish you didn't go through, maybe some experiences that might have changed the way you have relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic, that you can say, hey, well, I'm glad that I experienced that, not for exactly what I went through, but for what I learned from it. And now I know, hey, I won't do that, or I can't do this, and then become a better person from it. I just really want to say thank you for your time. I hope that we can
Thank you.
maybe get together again for another future podcast
Yes.
because I feel like we could talk for hours about this. But just to honor and recognize your time, I want to say thank you for being on here, and I want to say that I pray that this specific podcast can go out to a lot of different women and they can hear it and say, it is not worth it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Having a pimp is not worth it. Being in the game, love is out there. Real love is out there. Money is out there. All of these things will not go, but don't sacrifice who you are just to get these
Mhm.
things and being in the game because the game is not pretty. The game is ugly. It's manipulative. You're
It ruins
constantly
friendships,
fighting.
relationships.
It ruins friendships, it ruins relationships, it ruins your idea of them, and you're gonna have to go through a whole bunch of healing to unlearn it when you get out of the game because at the end of the day, you won't get out of the game. And I pray that it's by choice and not
Mhm.
through some other ways because that's a whole nother topic that we can talk about.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you
And
for having me.
I've